In the heart of the South Seas, where emerald jungles kiss the sapphire waves, sails a man feared by empires and worshipped by his crew, Sandokan, the Tiger of Malaysia. But this time, the storm he faces will not come from the sea. It will come from the shadows of treachery itself. The monsoon winds had barely settled when the waters of Labuan's coast shimmered under a bruised sunset. Sandokan stood at the prow of his schooner, the Lightning, his eyes scanning the horizon with a predator's calm. The air was thick with the scent of salt and rain-soaked earth, but beneath it lingered something else, the metallic tang of danger. Word had reached him of a new governor sent from Europe, a man with a fleet at his back and a bounty on Sandokan's head so vast it could buy a kingdom. Yet the Tiger of Malaysia was no prey. His hand rested on the hilt of his curved kriss, the other gripping the rail as the jungle coastline drew nearer. Somewhere inland lay the trap meant to end him, but also the secret that could make him unstoppable. The wind over Monsoons carried no scent of danger, until Kamamori's battered boat scraped against the hidden cove. He stumbled ashore, his face pale beneath the tropical sun, eyes wild with desperation. Sandokan. Tremalnark has been taken. The Tiger of Malaysia froze. His mind conjured the face of his old friend, the brave hunter who had once stood beside him against the deadliest foes. By whom? By the White Raja of Sarawak, James Brooke. Kamamori's voice cracked. He's been accused of crimes he never committed. He rots now in the fortress prison of Kuching. Yanaz de Gomera, calm and sardonic as ever, raised an eyebrow. A Raja who throws innocents into dungeons? I think we've met his kind before. Sandokan's gaze darkened, his hands curling into fists. Then we will tear his walls apart stone by stone. The drums of Monsoons began to beat, a signal that every tiger was to assemble. Men dropped their cards, their rum, their laughter, and came running, muskets slung, cutlasses gleaming. The air thickened with the scent of war. We sail at dawn, as Sandokan said, his voice low but carrying over the gathering storm of voices. For Tremalnark. For justice. And for the pride of the tigers of Malaysia. At nightfall, the great war prahus of Monsoons slid out into the open sea, their long oars cutting the water in perfect rhythm. The moon bathed the decks in silver light, glinting off blades that had tasted blood in 100 battles. Yanaz stood beside Sandokan at the prow, scanning the dark horizon. Brooke's ships patrol these waters. If they spot us before we reach the river mouth, we'll be fighting his navy before we even touch land. That would be inconvenient, as Sandokan murmured, his eyes narrowing. But not impossible. Below decks, Kamamori unfolded a rough map, drawn in hurried strokes. The fortress is guarded by cannon and soldiers, but there's a swamp path known only to the Dayaks. If we can find their chief, he may guide us. Sandokan nodded. Then we will win their trust. And if Brooke has wronged them as he has wronged us, they will join the tigers. A sudden cry shattered the night. One of the lookouts pointed starboard. Dark shapes loomed on the horizon. Sails. British-built schooners, armed and closing fast. Sandokan's smile was sharp and dangerous. Well, Yanaz, it seems our greeting party has arrived early. The sea erupted in fire. Cannon blasts thundered across the waves, and streaks of flame tore through the night. Splinters flew as one of the schooner's shots smashed into a tiger prahu, sending men tumbling into the black water. Hard to port, Yanaz shouted, steering the lead vessel with precise, ruthless skill. The Tigers returned fire, long, curved muskets spitting lead into the enemy decks. Sandokan leapt onto the rail, his cutlass gleaming in the moonlight. "Board them," he roared, and the Tigers surged forward. Grappling hooks bit into the schooner's hull. In moments, the decks became a storm of steel and fury. Sandokan fought like the beast whose name he bore, his blade cutting through Brooke's Marines as though they were reeds. Beside him, Yanaz fired shot after shot, each one finding its mark. When the schooner's captain fell with Sandokan's cutlass through his chest, the surviving crew threw down their arms. The Tigers wasted no time stripping the vessel of powder, arms, and charts. By dawn, the sea was littered with smoking wrecks, and the war pride of Monsoons sailed on. One battle won, the greater still ahead. The Tigers left their ships hidden in a mangrove inlet, the war drums falling silent. From here, the jungle would be their battlefield. The air grew heavy, thick with the perfume of orchids and the stench of decay. Huge ferns arched overhead, trapping the heat and turning every breath into steam. Kamamiri moved like a shadow ahead, scanning the undergrowth. "Dayak territory begins here," he whispered. "They see everything before you see them." Sandokan's eyes darted to movement in the canopy, dark shapes sliding from branch to branch. Spears glimmered in the filtered sunlight. A voice, deep and resonant, came from the shadows. "Ear who walks in the land of the Hornbill?" Sandokan stepped forward, palms open but head held high. "I am Sandokan, Tiger of Malaysia. I seek the chief who can lead me to the fortress of Kuching." The jungle erupted with whispers in a tongue unknown to him. Then the figure emerged, bare-chested, tattooed in swirling black lines, his gaze sharp as a predator's. Why should the Dayaks help a pirate? Sandokan's voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. "Because our enemy is yours. The White Raja builds walls to keep you out of your own lands. Fight with me, and we both tear those walls down." The Dayak chief, Pungar, regarded Sandokan in silence. Finally, he drew a blade carved from bone and sliced his own palm. Blood dripped onto the jungle floor. "If you take this oath, there is no turning back. We fight until the enemy falls, or until death takes us." Sandokan did not hesitate. He gripped the bone blade, drew a crimson line across his own hand, and pressed it to Pungar's. The jungle warriors roared approval, stamping spears into the earth. That night, the Tigers and Dayaks feasted together under the gaze of flickering torches. Drums pounded a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the jungle itself. Yanaz leaned toward Sandokan. "You know Brooke will not wait for us to come knocking. He'll send patrols, set traps." Sandokan smiled faintly. "Then we must strike first, before the fortress walls even feel our shadow." At dawn, Pungar scouts brought word of a British supply convoy moving upriver. Muskets, powder, food, all guarded by only a handful of Marines. Sandokan rose, his cutlass flashing in the first light. Then the tiger will hunt before the Raja even knows he's being stalked. The Sarawak River shimmered under the noonday sun, its muddy waters hiding crocodiles and worse. The British convoy moved slowly against the current, 3 flat-bottomed boats piled with barrels and crates, their red-coated guards drowsy in the heat. Hidden beneath a curtain of vines, the tigers and Dayaks waited. Sandokan crouched low, his eyes fixed on the lead boat. He gave the signal, a flick of his hand, and the jungle exploded into life. War cries shook the trees as canoes shot from the shadows. Arrows rained down, cutting through the humid air. The British scrambled to load their muskets, but it was too late. Sandokan leapt into the lead boat, his cutlass cleaving a marine's bayonet in half before it could touch him. Llanas, with deadly calm, were loaded and fired, each shot finding its mark. In less than 10 minutes, the river ran red, the convoy theirs. Barrels of powder, crates of rifles, sacks of rice, everything would feed the coming siege. As they pushed the captured boats into a hidden creek, Sandokan's grin was fierce. Now, Brooke will feel the jungle closing around him. By nightfall, Sandokan stood on a ridge overlooking Kuching. A fortress loomed in the moonlight, its stone walls bristling with cannon. Lanterns bobbed along the ramparts, and the river below glimmered with the reflections of anchored gunboats. Hunger spat into the dirt. Many men have tried to storm those walls. None have returned. Sandokan studied the layout, his eyes tracing the dark stretch of swamp on the fortress's western side. That is where we strike. No gunboat can follow us through the mud, and their cannon cannot fire into the reeds. Yanez smirked. I assume you have a plan that doesn't involve all of us sinking like stones in that swamp? A plan? Sandokan's grin was sharp. No. A hunt. The next days were spent cutting narrow channels through the swamp, the air thick with the buzz of insects. At night, the tigers sharpened their blades in silence, listening to the distant boom of Brooke's cannons testing their range. Kamamori returned from scouting with grim news. Tremalnark is alive, but he is to be executed in 3 days. The Tiger of Malaysia's eyes blazed. Then we will strike before his noose tightens. The night before the execution, mist rose from the swamp like ghostly fingers. Sandokan led the first wave, barefoot, stripped of any metal that might glint. Every step was a fight against the sucking mud, every breath filled with the rot of stagnant water. Dayak scouts moved ahead, their spears barely making a sound. A fortress loomed larger with every heartbeat, its torches flickering in the wind. At the base of the wall, Sandokan signaled for silence. Hooks with rope were swung, catching on the parapets. Tigers climbed like panthers, their blades drawn. A sentry turned, only to feel Sandokan's hand clamp over his mouth, a dagger sliding into his ribs. The body fell without a sound. Within minutes, the outer wall was theirs. But from deeper inside came the sound of alarm, a single, distant trumpet call. Someone had seen them. Sandokan's voice cut through the night, and no turning back now. Tigers, forward. The fortress erupted into chaos. Red-coated marines poured from the barracks, bayonets gleaming in the torchlight. The tigers met them head-on, blades flashing, muskets firing in deadly bursts. Punger's warriors leapt from the shadows, their spears finding gaps in British armour. Yanez fought like a fencer on a ballroom floor, each movement precise and fatal. Sandokan cut a path toward the inner keep, where Tremalnark was held. His cutlass rang against a sergeant's sabre, sparks flying, before he drove the man back into the wall. Kamamori appeared from the smoke, blood on his sleeve but eyes blazing. I found him. Come. They smashed through the door of the keep. Tremalnark, gaunt but alive, looked up in disbelief. Sandokan. Save your breath, the tiger growled. We're not done yet. From the courtyard came the thunder of hooves, Brooke's cavalry, charging in to crush the intruders. The clash of steel and the screams of the dying filled the night. Brooke himself rode at the head of his cavalry, saber raised, his face a mask of cold fury. Sandokan stepped into his path, cutlass ready. Their blades met with a crack like lightning. Brooke was skilled, but Sandokan's strength and fury drove him back, strike after relentless strike. Around them, the tigers and Dyaks fought like demons, holding the courtyard against wave after wave. Yanaz cut down a dragoon, then fired a pistol point blank into another's chest. Finally, Sandokan's blade tore Brooke's saber from his grasp. The Rajah tumbled from his horse, landing hard. Sandokan stood over him, breathing like a storm. Your fortress is broken. Your prisoner is free. Remember the Tiger of Malaysia. They vanished into the night, the fortress behind them aflame. By dawn, Mumpresam's war prahus were already slipping into the open sea, Tremalnark among them, free once more. The legend of Sandokan had grown again, and the British knew that the jungle would never bow to their crown.